I wasn't looking for another woman. I was looking for a wall to patch, a bill to pay, a reason to get out of bed that didn't feel like dragging a corpse from a grave. The cottage I rented was a testament to my life's current architecture, small, damp, and slowly falling apart at the seams. After Amelia, the city had felt like a cage lined with ghosts, every street corner a memory, every cafe a monument to a promise she'd broken. So I'd run, taking the first sublet I could find, a tiny stone outbuilding on a larger, forgotten property an hour from anywhere that mattered. For 6 months, the isolation was a bomb. I wrote my freelance articles, paid my rent, and spoke to no one but the cashier at the grocery store. It was a fragile piece, but it was mine. Then the email arrived. Subject: Notice to vacate. My stomach plummeted through the floorboards. I'd been late on rent twice, scraping by after a big client ghosted me. I had assumed a little grace, a little understanding. The email was polite, formal, and utterly final. It was signed by E. Vance, landlord. I had never met E. Vance. All my dealings had been through a property management company that had clearly just fired me as a tenant. Panic, cold and sharp, coiled in my gut. I had nowhere to go. My savings were a joke, a 3-figure insult sitting in my bank account. The thought of crawling back to my sister's spare room, of facing her pity and her endless, well-meaning questions, was suffocating. I had to do something. I had to appeal to this faceless landlord. I found her in the main house, a 2-story farmhouse that had seen better decades. A woman was on a ladder, wrestling with a loose shutter, her back to me. She was tall, with broad shoulders tapered to a narrow waist, clad in worn jeans, and a gray Henley that stretched across her shoulder blades. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot, a few stray curls escaping to brush against the strong column of her neck. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "I'm looking for E. Vance." She stilled, then turned her head. The profile was stark and beautiful, a strong jaw and a straight nose. She looked down at me from the ladder, and her eyes, a startlingly clear shade of green, held no surprise. "You found her," she said. Her voice was low, with a gravelly texture, like stones tumbling in a slow river. This was my landlord. Not some faceless corporation, or a balding man in a suit. It was a woman who smelled faintly of sawdust and rain. "I'm your tenant," I said, feeling foolishly small. "From the cottage. I got your email." She descended the ladder with an easy, unhurried grace, wiping her hands on a rag tucked into her waistband. Her hands were capable, her fingers long and flecked with paint. Up close, she was older than me, maybe late 30s, with fine lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled, even if she wasn't smiling now. "I know who you are," she said. Her expression was neutral, unreadable. I can get you the money," I lied, the words tasting like ash. "I just need a little more time. A week. Maybe 2 inch." She watched me, her gaze steady. It wasn't unkind, but it was dissecting. It was the look of someone accustomed to seeing through bullshit. "The notice gives you 30 days. That's the legal requirement." "I know, but things are tight right now. I just lost a major project." The confession felt like peeling off a layer of skin. "I'll be back on my feet soon. I'm a good tenant. I'm quiet. You don't even know I'm here." A flicker of something, wry humor, maybe, crossed her face. "I know you're here. I know your light is on until 3 in the morning. I know you get 1 grocery delivery a week. And I know the rent has been late twice." The specificity of her observations sent a hot flush of shame through me. She saw me. She saw my pathetic, lonely routine. My pride, already battered, reared up. "Okay. Fine. I'll be out in 30 days. I turned to leave, my throat tight with unshed tears of frustration. I'd rather be homeless than be scrutinized, pitted. "Wait," she said. The word wasn't a command, but it stopped me all the same. I turned back. She was leaning against the ladder, arms crossed over her chest. The posture was casual, but her eyes were intense. I'm not a monster. I don't want to put you out on the street. You have a funny way of showing it, I muttered before I could stop myself. That earned me a ghost of a smile. I have a mortgage to pay, just like you have rent. The property management company I was using was useless. I'm taking over myself and I'm trying to get things in order, she gestured vaguely at the sprawling, overgrown yard. There's a lot of work to be done. More than I can handle alone before winter. I stared at her, not understanding where this was going. The old greenhouse, she said, nodding toward the back of the property. It's a wreck. The glass is broken, the frame is rotting. My grandmother built it. I want to restore it, she paused, her gaze locking onto mine. I can't afford to hire a crew right now. And you can't afford to pay rent. The unspoken offer hung in the air between us, heavy and strange. My mind raced, weighing the indignity against the sheer, terrifying reality of my situation. Work for my landlord. In exchange for a roof over my head. It felt futile, archaic. You want me to do construction? I asked, incredulous. I looked down at my own hands, soft and useless, good only for typing. I want you to help me, she corrected gently. I'll do the heavy lifting, the skilled work. I need a second pair of hands. To clear the debris, pull weeds, hand me tools, prime the wood, clean the salvaged glass. It's not glamorous, her eyes held mine. I'll forgive this month's rent, and next month's, if you help me finish it. We work until it's done. You get to stay. That's the deal. It was an offer of salvation wrapped in humiliation. A lifeline that felt suspiciously like a leash. But as I looked at her, at the quiet competence in her posture, the exhaustion shadowing her sharp features, I saw that she wasn't trying to control me. She was just as stuck as I was, in her own way. We were two women, backed into our respective corners. Okay, I heard myself say, the word a small puff of surrender. I'll do it. Her name was Elara. I learned that the first day. We worked in a silence that was thick with unspoken things. My resentment, her pragmatism, the awkwardness of our arrangement. The greenhouse was worse than she'd described. It was a skeleton of a building, choked with thorns and littered with shattered, moss-covered glass. It smelled of decay and damp earth. It looked exactly how I felt inside. My job at first was menial. I dragged dead vines out, their thorny branches catching on my clothes and skin. I filled wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow with debris and broken panes. Elara worked with a focused, methodical energy, prying rotted boards from the frame, her movements economical and sure. She didn't offer small talk, and for that, I was grateful. It allowed me to exist inside my own head, to nurse my wounded pride. I watched her when she wasn't looking. I watched the way the muscles in her forearms flexed when she lifted a heavy plank. I watched the intense concentration on her face as she measured a cut, her lower lip caught between her teeth. I became a connoisseur of the small, specific details of her existence. The scent that clung to her wasn't just sawdust, it was cedar, sharp and clean. And when she worked up a sweat, it was mixed with the smell of the rich soil we were turning over. It was the scent of life, of effort, of things that grow. A week into our strange contract, I was trying to pry a stubborn root from the ground when my hand slipped. The edge of a broken piece of glass, hidden in the dirt, sliced deep into my palm. I hissed, dropping the trowel and clutching my hand as blood welled up, bright red against the grime. Are you all right? Elara was there in an instant, her calm voice cutting through my flare of pain. She gently took my wrist, turning my hand over to inspect the damage. Her touch was firm, her fingers surprisingly warm against my skin. The calluses on her fingertips were a stark contrast to my own softness. For a dizzying second, I wasn't a tenant or a charity case. I was just a woman being touched by another woman, and my breath caught in my throat. It's fine, I said, trying to pull away, embarrassed by my clumsiness, by her proximity. It's not fine, it's deep. Come on, she didn't release my wrist, instead leading me out of the greenhouse and toward the main house. Her kitchen was large and airy, with slate countertops and sunlight streaming through a wide window. It was clean and organized, a stark contrast to the chaos of my cottage and my life. She sat me down at the table, running the tap and pulling out a first aid kit. She cleaned the cut with an antiseptic wipe that stung like hell, but her movements were so gentle, so focused, that I found myself holding my breath. She worked in silence, her head bent, a stray curl falling across her forehead. I had the absurd urge to reach out and brush it back. You should have been wearing gloves, she said, her voice soft, not chiding. I forgot them, I mumbled, watching as she carefully applied a bandage. Her hands were deft and certain. When she was done, her thumb brushed against my pulse point, a fleeting, accidental touch that sent a jolt straight through me. She met my eyes, and for the first time, the professional neutrality in her gaze was gone. It was replaced by something warmer, something questioning. The air in the sunlit kitchen suddenly felt thick, charged. Why did you come here? She asked, her voice quiet. To this place? It's not exactly a destination. The question was so direct, so unexpected, it disarmed me. The truth tumbled out before I could stop it. I was running away, I admitted, looking down at my bandaged hand. From a person. A woman. I risked a glance at her. She didn't flinch. There was no surprise, no judgment. Just a quiet, patient waiting. It was a bad breakup, I added, the understatement of the century. She blew up my life, and I just needed to go somewhere she couldn't find me. Somewhere quiet. Elara nodded slowly, her green eyes holding mine. Sometimes quiet is what you need to hear yourself again. She finally let go of my wrist, and the loss of contact left my skin feeling cold. Thank you for telling me. The next day, she started talking. Not a lot, but it was a beginning. She told me about the greenhouse. My grandmother, Lena, taught me everything I know about fixing things, she said, sanding a piece of reclaimed cypress. She built this place with her own hands. Grew orchids in it. Said it was the only place she could breathe after my grandfather passed. She spoke of her grandmother with a deep, reverent love that made my own heart ache. I had been so wrapped up in my own narrative of loss, I hadn't considered that this quiet, capable woman might have her own ghosts. I learned that she'd inherited the property a year ago, that she'd left a high-stress architecture job in the city to come here and try to bring it back to life. People think I'm crazy, she said one afternoon, a wry smile touching her lips. We were sitting on the stone floor, sharing a bottle of water. Leaving a six-figure salary to fix a leaky roof and fight with raccoons. Are you? I asked, surprising myself with the gentle tease. Her smile widened. Probably. But I'm happier covered in dirt than I ever was in a boardroom. She looked around the greenhouse, at the new wooden beams, the stacks of cleaned glass panes waiting to be installed. This feels real. Rebuilding something that was loved. It feels important. I understood what she meant. Every day as we worked, something was being rebuilt in me too. The physical labor exhausted my body and quieted the frantic noise in my head. The simple, shared goal of putting this broken thing back together was a balm to my fractured spirit. And my awareness of Elara grew into a constant, humming frequency beneath my skin. I loved the way she'd squint at the sky to judge the weather, the way she'd absently push her hair out of her face with the back of a dusty wrist. I loved the low sound of her humming when she was concentrating on a difficult task. I was falling for my landlord. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. This was the exact opposite of what I'd wanted. I'd come here for isolation, to swear off women, and the spectacular ways they could break your heart. But Elara wasn't like Amelia. Where Amelia was a wildfire, dazzling and exciting and ultimately destructive, Elara was the earth. She was steady, patient and strong. She made me feel safe. The turning point came during a sudden thunderstorm. The sky, which had been a placid blue moments before, turned a bruised purple. The wind kicked up, whipping through the empty frames of the greenhouse, and then the rain came down in a torrent. Inside, Ilara yelled over the roar, and we scrambled into the small, tool-choked shed attached to the greenhouse. We were crammed together in the small space, the smell of rain, damp earth, and her skin filling my senses. The storm raged outside, a drumbeat on the tin roof. Rain lashed against the shed's one small window. "That came out of nowhere," she said, her voice a low rumble close to my ear. Her shoulder was pressed against mine, a point of solid, grounding heat. "Yeah," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs for a reason that had nothing to do with the thunder. I was acutely aware of every inch of her. The stray strands of her damp hair clinging to her neck, the rise and fall of her chest, the sheer, solid presence of her next to me. The power flickered and died, plunging the shed into a murky twilight. In the dim light, her face was all shadows and angles. Her eyes, luminous even in the gloom, were fixed on mine. The world shrank to the space between us. The air grew thick, heavy with everything we hadn't said for weeks. I saw her gaze drop to my mouth, and my own breath hitched. She leaned in, just a fraction of an inch, and my entire body went rigid with anticipation. This was it. The moment where everything changed. The rain hammered down, the wind howled, and in our tiny, fragile shelter, a different kind of storm was brewing. I could feel the magnetic pull between us, an undeniable force drawing us closer. My lips parted slightly. A violent crack of thunder, directly overhead, made us both jump. The moment shattered. Ilara blinked and pulled back, running a hand through her damp hair. The connection was broken, but the echo of it remained, vibrating in the space between us. "Sorry," she mumbled, her voice sounding rough. "It's a little close in here." "It's okay," I whispered, though it wasn't. My body was thrumming with a potent mix of disappointment and a wild, soaring hope. Nothing had happened. And yet, everything had. After the storm, the air between us was permanently charged. Every accidental brush of our hands, as we worked, felt like an electric shock. Every shared glance held a new, dangerous weight. We worked faster, with a feverish energy, as if finishing the greenhouse would somehow resolve the unbearable tension between us. I was consumed by her. At night, in my cold cottage, I'd lie awake and think of her calloused hands, her quiet smile, the way she'd looked at me in the dark of the shed. I was terrified of what would happen when the work was done. The deal would be fulfilled. Would she just go back to being my landlord? Would I go back to being the solitary tenant in the cottage? The thought was unbearable. We put the last pane of glass in on a cool, clear evening. The setting sun slanted through the newly installed panes, throwing long, golden shafts of light across the clean floor. The greenhouse was whole again. It was beautiful, a testament to our shared labor. It stood as a symbol of our strange, quiet journey from strangers to something else. We stood inside, side by side, not speaking. The scent of fresh sawdust and potting soil filled the air. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "It's amazing, Ilara," I said, and my voice was thick with emotion. I wasn't just talking about the building. She turned to face me. The golden light caught in her hair, turning it to bronze. Her green eyes were soft, vulnerable. "I couldn't have done it without you." "It's the least I could do," I started to say, falling back on the transactional nature of our deal, but she stopped me. "No," she said, her voice firm. She took a step closer. "It was never about the rent." "Not really." I don't know. I saw you standing there on my lawn, looking so lost. And I guess I was lost, too." My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. "Ilara. I don't want this to end," she whispered, the words I'd been screaming in my own head for weeks. "The work is done. But I don't want you to just go back to your cottage and me to my house. I don't want to go back to pretending we're just a landlord and a tenant." She reached out, her hand hesitating for a moment before her fingers gently cupped my jaw. Her thumb stroked my cheek, and a wave of warmth spread through my entire body. I leaned into her touch, my eyes fluttering shut. This was real. "Say something," she murmured, her voice a breath away from my lips. I opened my eyes. "I don't want it to end either," I breathed. And then she kissed me. It wasn't a hesitant, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of certainty, of arrival. It was firm and soft and tasted of hope, and hard work, and the sweet evening air. All the walls I had so carefully constructed around my heart crumbled into dust. I wrapped my arms around her neck, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss. It felt like coming home. It felt like finding a place I didn't even know I'd been searching for. We stayed in the greenhouse as the sky outside turned from gold to violet to a deep, stardusted indigo. We talked. We kissed more. It was a cascade of feeling, a torrent of confessions and admissions that had been held back for weeks. She told me she'd noticed me from the beginning, that my late-night light had been a beacon of another lonely soul on her property. I told her how her quiet strength had been the only thing holding me together. That night, I didn't go back to my cottage. I stayed with her, in her house, in her bed. It was an intimacy that felt both brand new and centuries old. Lying beside her in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, I felt a sense of peace I thought I had lost forever. The next morning, tangled in her sheets with the early light filtering through the window, the reality of our situation settled in. The power imbalance was still there. I was still her tenant, living here on her grace. As if reading my mind, she propped herself up on an elbow, her expression serious. "I need you to know," she said, her voice soft but clear. "This was never transactional. Your staying here has nothing to do with this," she gestured between us. "I'm tearing up the notice. You can stay as long as you want. We'll figure out the rent when you're back on your feet. Or you can pay me in greenhouse maintenance." A small smile played on her lips. "This," she said, her fingers gently tracing my arm, "is separate. This is for us." Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was my sister. I ignored it, but it buzzed again. With a sigh, I answered. "Where have you been?" she demanded, her voice a mix of worry and exasperation. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you? That whole hermit thing can't be good for you. Just come home." I looked at Alara, who was watching me with patient, understanding eyes. And for the first time, the word home didn't make me think of my sister's spare room, or the city I'd fled. It made me think of this quiet house, this strong woman, this restored greenhouse waiting to be filled with life. "I am home, Chloe," I said, my voice steady and sure. "I'm okay. I'm more than okay." I hung up before she could argue. Alara smiled, a real, beautiful smile that lit up her whole face. She leaned in and kissed me again, slow and deep. Later that day, she brought in a stack of seed catalogs. We sat on the floor of her living room, heads bent together, planning what we would plant in our greenhouse. Rows of tomatoes, climbing sweet peas, and in the warmest corner, a place for an orchid. A place to breathe. A place to grow. Isn't it strange how the very thing you run from can lead you exactly where you need to be? Sometimes, the only way to rebuild your own broken walls is to help someone else restore theirs. What would you do if the only path forward required you to trust the one person who held all the power over you? If you were moved by this story of finding love in an unexpected place, please give this video a like, subscribe for more stories that celebrate love in all its forms, and let us know in the comments what you thought.